Well, we have a great crowd here. This is wonderful. So I guess before we get started, I just have a couple of questions for the audience. Is there anybody here who is new to rhododendrons? Maybe you moved here from out of the area, or you moved into a place that doesn't have rhododendrons and you don't need to know what to do? Good, we've got a lot of new people. Excellent. Are there people that maybe you could, maybe you've got some questions or you've got some problems, kind of want to know a little bit more about? Oh, great. Also got some of those out there. Wonderful. Hopefully I can help you out with that too. Is there anybody that just showed up for the native plant workshop? That's okay. We have native rhododendrons too, and hopefully you'll incorporate those in your landscape. So this is the wonderful world of rhododendrons, and let's get started. So today I'm going to cover kind of an overview of the vast variety of rhododendrons out there, sizes, shapes, foliage, colors, and hopefully that you can expand into your landscape some of the more unfamiliar ones that you might be interested in. And also some common questions. My rhododendron's too big. Do I need to prune it? Why isn't my rhododendron blooming? What's eating my rhodi? And what about fertilizer? So hopefully we can answer some of those questions. Let's start at the very beginning. Wikipedia, our source of all knowledge now. So according to that, it's from the Greek for rose, tree, which seems like a very appropriate term. The rhododendron is actually a huge genus. There's over 1,000 different species of rhododendrons in the wild. They're most common in mostly in Asia, Tibet, and Nepal, but we also find them in the Appalachians of North America. It's the national flower of Nepal, and most of them have brightly colored flowers which bloom from late winter to early summer. It also is the heath feather, the heath family, the Ericaceas. So it's the same as like blueberries, huckleberries. Let's see what else. There's a lot of other plants that are in the Ericaceae family too. Okay, to Wikipedia, we would also add that we have native rhododendrons here in the Pacific Northwest. We have native ones in Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, Northern California, quite a wide variety of them. And in case you're new to the area, the state flower for Washington is Rhododendron macrophyllum. So where can you go and see the native rhododendrons around here? We're in a good spot because the Olympic Peninsula, the Kitsap Peninsula, Mount Walker. If you're not familiar with Mount Walker, if you go north on Highway 101, Mount Walker is just off on the right. If you're there on a clear day, spectacular views all the way to Seattle. And the whole hillside is covered with native rhododendrons. If you happen to be there, usually late April, early May, that's when they're mostly in bloom. It's really spectacular. Also, if you happen to be driving between Shelton and Bremerton around that same time period, there's a lot of native rhododendrons that are out just right by the roadside. So it's a great spot to see them right here in our backyard, so to speak. Okay, complaints about rhododendrons. I once had a friend and she said, I hate rhododendrons. Well, I was really astounded. It's like, how can anybody hate rhododendrons? Well, her point was they're overplanted. You see them everywhere. They only bloom for a couple of weeks in May, and then they're ugly the rest of the year. And they're all pink. So you may have heard some of these same opinions. And so I'll try to address some of these issues. Overplanted. Well, you do see them everywhere, but I think there's an excellent reason for that. We live in perfect rhododendron habitat. Our mild climate in the winter and in the summer, abundant rain, acid soils, that is what rhododendrons thrive on. So, I mean, what I say is go for it. You know, if I was in Arizona, I'd be growing cactus, but I am here in Washington, and so rhododendrons are the thing. They bloom for a couple of weeks in May and then they're boring the rest of the year. No. There probably are many hybrids that do bloom in May. We tend to kind of think about May being prime rhododendron month, but there are many other rhododendrons out there that you can use to extend your season. For instance, my show and tell plant, this is one called Lee Scarlet. It starts blooming in the fall, November, October, sometimes as early as October. And then it kind of blooms intermittently. It's just started another flush of blooms here. Now, it's never covered, so it's not really as spectacular as the May bloomers, but man, this time of year, a little spot of color, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. Some of the other, if you go to some of the rhododendron gardens, I'll talk about that a little bit later too. They have rhododendrons that are, starting to bloom January and then go all the way through June. Usually, there's none of them I can think of right offhand that are late summer, but other than that, pretty much the whole, throughout the year, you can find some varieties that are blooming. So you can certainly extend the season beyond May. They're all pink. Well, okay. So pink is probably the most common color, but pink in all its variations, there's doubles, there's ruffles, and also all the other colors, probably every color of the rainbow except for true blue. So you get red, white, yellow, purple, everything. They're certainly way beyond pink. And this one is called Lee Scarlet. To me, it is more of a, it's not a true scarlet, but there are some true red ones out there too. Okay, let's look at the varieties of sizes, and from probably the huge ones. And this is one rhododendron. It's in England. It was probably about 120 years ago. Most of us do not have a large enough space to have a rhododendron that big, but luckily the hybridizers have been working at getting much more small, compact rhododendrons. So there's probably one for just about any space in your landscape. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Okay, so down to the small ones. There are some dwarf ones that are only, say, 6 inches tall, maybe a foot wide. You can kind of tuck them in underneath some other plants, sort of like, see that one? This is a rhododendron, but these are also rhododendrons down here. They're much smaller and more compact. And so you can use them as a kind of almost like a landscape type plant. So there's certainly a wide variety of sizes and shapes. Colors, like I said, just about every color of the rainbow out there except for true blue. So you can certainly get a wide variety of beyond pink for the colors. Some of them are bicolor, some of them have got, they call this the blotch or the splotch that's in the center that's a different color from the outside. Peaches, yellow. There's certainly a wide variety of colors out there, and there's bicolors, lots of different ways to expand it beyond pink. Leaf size. These are rhododendrons, but they can have very small leaves up to like a ½ inch, up to ones that are 2 feet or more. And some of the tree forms, Sino Grande is one. And you can see this person here for scale, that those are huge leaves. Also you can have some that are just very narrow leaves. I don't remember the variety of this one, but this one, I had one of these in my garden. It's very, you don't look at that and say, whoa, that's a rhododendron, because it's so unusual. It has very narrow, strappy leaves, and also the blooms are very narrow. Foliage. I think, they say, well, they bloom, and then you got to look at the foliage. This is absolutely true. The blooms are spectacular, but you're looking at the plant the whole rest of the year. So you may as well have something good to look at. Luckily, there's a lot of beautiful foliage in rhododendrons. Some of them have fuzzy foliage. They have the new foliage that comes out. This is the new foliage, which is this brownish, and then it changes to green as it gets older. We've got ones that are yellowish, brown. They're bicolor. They're green and yellow, green and white. Some of them have got this almost like a frosted, fuzzy leaf ones. And then the undersides can also be red, brown. So there's quite a variety of foliage. And that's another good way to extend the interest in your landscape, is look for ones that have wonderful foliage. The fuzzy leafed ones, basically, if it's fuzzy on the top, it's called tomentum. If it's fuzzy on the underside, it's called indimentum. Some rhododendrons are fuzzy top and bottom, some just on the top, some just on the bottom. But if you're looking for something that the deer, well, deer don't usually eat rhododendrons. There's always an exception, but they typically tend to leave rhododendrons alone. But maybe, I don't know, rabbits, something else that might want to munch on leaves. Certainly insects. We're going to talk about the root beetles later on. They tend to not go for the fuzzy leafed ones. So if that's a problem in your garden, go for a fuzzy leafed one. Okay, here's your botany lesson for the day. In the rhododendron world, they're divided into two kinds, lepidote and illepidote. And the lepidote are that's kind of the typical ones that we think about most often. They have larger leaves. It literally means without scales. And the scales they're talking about are on the underside of the plant. I keep fading in and out here. So it's they tend to be larger in size, although there's a lot of variation. They can have some leaves that are only very small to some of the ones that are a couple of feet long. And they can have these fuzzy leafed ones. These are all illepidote. The variety called Yakushimanum, and you may have heard somebody talks about a yak rhododendron or a yak cross, and that's the native kind that's called Yakushimanum. The hybridizers love this plant. It has beautiful foliage. It's got that gorgeous kind of brownish fuzzy foliage. Also very nice flowers, a lot of good characteristics that hybridizers like. So if you hear that term, now you know where that came from. The other kind are the lepidotes, the small leaves or scaly leaves. And this is kind of fun. I've gone out in my yard with sometimes you can see the scales. And literally, they're little brown spots on the underside of the leaf. And it's just kind of fun. You go out there and you look at it and you say, oh yeah, they're scales. Okay, cool. It's gotta be a lepidote one. They tend to take more sun than the bigger leaf ones. They also tend to have smaller leaves. Now again, there's exceptions to all these rules, but they're smaller growing. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you're looking for those characteristics, if you can see the scales on there, then you know that's what you're looking at. Okay, now, as a practical matter, do you really need to know if your rhododendron is lepidote or illepidote? No. You can happily live your life. You can go on for the next 30 years and really not know about it. I think what is kind of important though is if it's a hybrid or a species. So first we're going to go into a little bit about what is a species. So species rhododendrons are those as found in nature. And as we said, there's over 1,000 of them. So just a tremendous variety of them. They're propagated usually sexually, asexually, cuttings, transplants, tissue culture. And Barbara's going to talk to you a lot more about propagation, so I'm not going to get into this too much. But typically they're known by their scientific name. Some examples are ponticum, occidentale, which is a native down to the southern Oregon and northern California coast, very fragrant, gorgeous rhododendron. Yakushimanum, which we talked a little bit about. Now, what's a hybrid? Those are sexually. Usually they are taken pollen from one variety and use it to fertilize another variety. You can get natural crosses in nature, but typically humans are taking the pollen and making crosses, trying to enhance characteristics that they're looking for. It might be size, it might be color, it might be disease resistance, various other characteristics that you're looking for. Often these they're not known by their scientific names. They are often named after a person. A lot of rhododendrons are named after a person. Percy Wiseman, which is kind of a funky name, but it's a gorgeous plant. Point Defiance, so the place, or a color, such as like orange marmalade. There's over 15,000 registered rhododendrons out there. So people will say, oh, what rhododendron do I have? It's like, I have not a clue, usually, just because there are so darn many of them. And many of them are very similar. So it's really hard to tell hybrids, the different, unless you're really into it. It's hard often to tell the different hybrids apart. There are some guides out there that kind of help you try to figure it out. You can go online, you can look them up. But it's certainly not, it's like, I don't know 15,000 different rhododendrons, I'll tell you for sure. Okay, where can I buy or see hybrids? And the answer is practically anywhere around here in Western Washington. The hardware stores, the big box stores, the specialty gardens, or specialty nurseries such as Bark and Garden or the Barn over in Thurston County. There are rhododendron nurseries such as Whitney's in Brennan. If you haven't been there, oh yeah, it's worth a trip. Certainly in May when a lot of the rhododendrons are in bloom. It's kind of a bit of a drive up 101, but it's worth it. It's great. Downs Rhododendrons in Thurston County off of Little Rock Road. They have a wonderful selection of rhododendrons. They also have great websites. Both these places have got great websites. You can look up different colors, what time of bloom, how big they get, all those kind of characteristics. So another one that I don't have on here is Meerkerk, it's Meerkerk, I believe, gardens in Whidbey Island. I just happened to be on their website lately, and they also have a list of what's blooming now. They actually have 6 rhododendrons blooming right now in January. So basically, that's another one that's it's good any time of year to go take a visit. But if you're looking to extend your season, if you kind of go, outside of the May and time period, then you can find rhododendrons that are blooming at other times of year. They also have a great website with different varieties on there. And your friends, your neighbors, you might have an old rhododendron on your neighbor's property, and you really like it. You could take cuttings. Barbara's going to tell us more about how you might want to go and do that. And you can, steal some for your own. The Shelton rhododendron, our plant sale and plant show and sale, and the Shelton chapter of the American Rhododendron Society was founded in 1961 in this county, so we've been around a long time. Our membership's kind of dwindled lately, but we're trying to build it back up. If anybody's interested, we would love to have you. We're looking for this year, we're in the final stages of our planning, but we're hoping to have it at Tozier's Ace Hardware around Mother's Day weekend. And so if you're in the market then, come up and show us. We've got knowledgeable members. They can answer questions, help you pick out some rhododendrons, help you take care of them. It's a great thing. Okay, now species rhododendrons. Where can I buy and see species rhododendrons? We are so lucky in this part of the world because we live pretty much right down the road from the Rhododendron Species Foundation in Federal Way, which if you take I-5, it's actually at 143, I have it down, and then follow the signs. And it is the biggest display garden of species rhododendrons, I think, in the world, certainly in the United States. It's a fabulous place. If you haven't been there, it's definitely worth a visit any time of year. The species tend to start blooming earlier, say April and May, but then again on their website they can tell you what's blooming now, what's blooming next month, and on throughout the season. They also have a nursery. They have species rhododendrons for sale. They have a catalog. You can get them mail order. It's a tremendous resource, and we're so fortunate to have it just right here in our backyard, essentially. They have over 700 of the known 1,000 species, so you can tell they've got just a huge variety of species rhododendrons there. And conservation has become one of their major missions because in the wild, a lot of rhododendron habitat is being lost. And so they're trying to rescue them out of the wild and propagate them so that they can expand out so we're not lost forever. The Rutherford Conservatory, this is like a huge greenhouse at the Rhododendron Species Foundation up in Federal Way. It's relatively new. I was going to say like within the last 5 years, but time flies. It's probably been there 10 years or more by now. But they also, since they have this climate control facility now, they can get into the tropical rhododendrons, which are called vireas. So if you really want to get into rhododendrons, and if you've got the right conditions of humidity and warmth, you can grow tropical rhododendrons, which is always kind of fun. This is taken shortly after they open, so I'm sure the interior plantings have matured quite a bit, but this is also the conservatory at the Species Foundation. Great place to go on a kind of a drizzly, wintry day. You get a little taste of the tropics. Wonderful. These are some examples of vireas. They have almost naive neon colors, just very, very vibrant colors. And it's kind of fun to have, you know, some tropical plants growing. Gives you a little taste of, I don't know, the tropics somewhere. Okay, so back to just what do rhododendrons need? Well, a lot of the acidic soils, which is very easy to come by around here. Most of us have got acidic soils without doing anything to them. Protection usually from the hot afternoon sun, water in late summer, especially the hybrids. Mulch to retain moisture and to give it organic matter. Fertilizing once or twice a year, kind of the rule of thumb. If you're going to do it twice a year, around Valentine's Day, and then again about Father's Day. If you're only going to do it once a year, then anytime March and April is probably a good time. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about fertilizer in just a little bit. Now the exception is if you are unlucky enough to be in an area that has hard pan or heavy clay soils, you probably want to burn them up because they need that excellent drainage. They like a lot of this moisture that we have, but they don't like sitting and standing water at all. That'll root the roots. So rot the roots. So that's something to keep in mind depending on your soils. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit of the most common questions that we get asked at our rhodie club. And people will say, oh, my rhodie is too big. What can I do with it? Well, to prune or not to prune, that is the question. Now, this is an example. So we're assuming that they want to be able to get in their front door and maybe be able to see out of their upper window and their lower window. Now, so the kind of the rule of thumb is you can prune it back by 1/3 a year and it shouldn't hurt it. Now, it depends on when you prune. Ideally, you would prune like right after they bloom so that you're not getting any of next year's blooms. The problem with it is like a big one like this, if you get into pruning, you maybe end up doing it every year. And so every year you're out there, it's a lot of time and work, and you're probably pruning off the blooms. And so it's really may not be desirable. You can, now this one, we could, take off some of these lower branches, open it up a little bit, then you can see out this window a little bit, at least trim it up back a little here so they actually get to the front door. That's always nice. And then, so that's a little bit about pruning. Selective, a lot of these, I can talk about this, but before I forget, a lot of these big rhododendrons like this have got gorgeous bark. A lot of times kind of red exfoliating bark. They've got wonderful branching structures. I'll show some pictures in a little bit. So if you do a little selective pruning, maybe some of these bigger limbs, you can open that up. You can see that structure inside the plant. It also makes it a little bit more so you can see from the house, kind of through the bush. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Move it. Rhododendrons are relatively easy to move, even big ones. They have a shallow, fibrous root structure. They don't have a big tap root, so you don't have to worry about that. This is a small rhododendron, but it kind of gives you an idea about how the root mass is compared with that plant. And so just as an example, I'll show you, this is a rhododendron that we moved to our yard several years ago. It was probably about, I don't know, 6 or 8 feet tall and maybe 10 feet wide when we moved it. One of our members of the Shelton chapter called me up one day in the middle of the summer and said, I'm going to have my house painted and the painters want to whack this rhododendron back and I don't want that to happen. If you want to come and dig it up, you can have it. Okay, we'll go and get it. And so basically we did summer. The worst time to transplant a rhododendron. I do not recommend it. If you're going to do this, winter is good. Probably spring, fall, anytime but summer, but that's when it was available, so that's when we had to do it. And so what we did was dug, my husband did the digging, probably as deep as you can get for that root ball, probably 1.5 feet if you can get it down there. Then we had a winch and a come along, and we put it on a tarp, and then we winched it into the back of our pickup truck, and we moved it over to our house. Luckily, we didn't have very far to go. And if I was going to be out taking it on the freeway, we would have covered it with a tarp to try to protect the leaves from wind, because that could just absolutely decimate a plant if you're transporting it long distances. Then we figured out where we wanted it, and we dug a hole and then put it in the hole, no amendments. Now, we're relatively lucky where I am. I have some loamy soil, so I have pretty good soil. Again, if you are in an area where you've got clay layers or you've got hard pan, then you probably want to berm it up or do something else. But generally speaking, you want it to be in the native soil where it's going to be growing, because it's got to be able to get out into that native soil. You don't want it just growing right there in your little spot that you've gotten all ready for it. So, but then you do want to cover it with a layer of compost, cover it with a layer of mulch. You want that organic matter there to keep the moisture in and also give it some nutrients. Water it really well for certainly the first year, and then the first couple of years if it's going to be dry conditions. And you probably be very successful. Like I said, they're even big ones are relatively easy to move. Now, what I was trying to show here, and it doesn't really show up well, is the structure of the inside. This is that same rhododendron close up, and the bark is kind of main trunk, and you might be able to see a little bit of the kind of that branching structure and kind of the exfoliating bark. Some of these are gorgeous, so open it up a little bit and take advantage of that. It's such an attraction to the landscape. This is one that I got off of the internet that also shows some of that branching structure. So you can have some, big old rhodies, but you can get some of the, really interesting limbs and bark there. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is a radical pruning. This is not recommended. Probably everybody has seen examples of this. Since rhododendrons are fairly tough, and this is good habitat for them, people will say, you can cut it back to the ground, no problem. Well, this is, like I said, it's not recommended. This is considering major surgery. The patient may not make it. If you do this and the plant doesn't die, you can expect that you're going to have a lot of weak new growth that's going to come out, what they call spaghetti strings. And the reason for that is this plant has probably got a root ball way out over here or more. And so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to try to get the foliage back equal with the roots. So you're going to get a lot of new, very weak growth. Now you can go back selectively, prune some of that out over several years, and several years down the road, you might have a fairly decent looking plant. But I think there's better things to do, probably to get it in a site that it can reach its potential, because these plants are genetically programmed to get to be a certain height and width. And if you can accommodate that rather than fight it, you and the plant are probably going to be a lot happier. Okay, pruning. Now maybe you've got one that's getting kind of leggy and you just want to have it be a little shaped up a little bit more. So pruning, you basically go right above there's a whorl of leaves here. Now, I don't know if you can see, certainly not in the back, but there's these little bumps along the stem there. Those are called nodes. If you happen to prune right above any of these nodes, it will stimulate new growth to come out from there. Instead of having one stalk going straight up, like this one is, you'll have a number of smaller stems coming out. So that's a way to get it more bushy. Now this is probably 1 year's growth. So it's going to be a big rhododendron. And so you can do a little bit to try to keep it maybe a little bit contained, but again, it's going to want to be as big as it's going to want to be. Okay, this is some similar type things. In this case, we're pinching off the top. In this case, it's a leaf bud. You don't want to pinch off your flower blooms, obviously, but it's a leaf bud up here. And it does the same thing. It'll stimulate new growth So you'll end up with a bushier, more compact plant. So this is the new growth coming out from where it was pinched out here. And so that's a way to, you know, if you want it a bushier or more compact, that's the way to do it. Okay, another question that we get asked a lot: why didn't my rhodie bloom? There's a lot of different reasons. Sometimes you can figure it out, sometimes you can't figure it out. It may be that it's too young. Ones that are grown in the nursery tend to have ideal conditions, and so it may be in bloom when you bring it home and then you put it in the ground and it doesn't bloom the next year. Well, give it a year or so to kind of get used to its new habitat. It could be that it was kind of forced, that, you know, it needs to get a little bit older and it will bloom again. Some of the species rhododendrons don't bloom until they're 20 years old. So if you get a species rhododendron, don't be surprised if you're not going to get blooms. My husband loves the big leaf rhododendrons, the big species rhododendrons, the ones that have got leaves that are, you know, 1.5 to 2 feet long. And we finally have one that bloomed, and it's been blooming the last couple of years. And it's probably been, 20, 25 years that plant's been in the ground. So those guys, don't get impatient about them. Too much shade. We tend to think of rhododendrons being shade lovers, and they are very adapted to shade, but they do need some sun to put on blooms. Probably 4 to 6 hours of sun, or bright indirect sun. Morning sun is ideal. Afternoon sun, not so much. Another reason is not enough water. And this, I think, is pretty common around here if we get really dry summers, which, you know, we get. If we get a hot, dry summer, that's when they're setting the buds for the coming year. And so if they get water stress, they're not going to set buds for the coming year. So it's worthwhile to water your rhododendrons in late summer. Not enough fertilizer, too much fertilizer, or you fertilize too late, and then all you'll get is leaf buds and not bloom buds. So those are some of the reasons why your rhododendron might not be blooming. A few other things. This is a disease. It's called rhododendron bud blast. It's a fungal disease. These little black bristly things are very distinctive for bud blast. That's actually the fruiting body of that the fungal disease. And so if you see this, you know you've got rhododendron bud blast. It's really frustrating because it's got these gorgeous buds that set on, and then all of a sudden, you know, they turn brown, they die, and you think, oh my goodness, what's going on? Well, bud blast is it's frustrating in a lot of respects because a lot of it's weather related. So you might have, it might be really bad one spring and then not so much the next year. You know, since it is a fungal disease, you can spray it with fungicide, but it's, like I said, it may not help because it depends so much on the environmental conditions. What you want to do is to pick those off. Do not compost them, destroy them, burn them, put them in a bag, take them, send them to the landfill, something like that. You don't want those spreading around in your garden if at all possible. And deadheading. Always good. Somewhere there's this myth floating around out there that says if you don't deadhead, you're not going to get blooms the following year. Well, I'm here to tell you, I've got several hundred rhododendrons in my yard, and they do not get deadheaded. And you probably also, the ones out in the wild, nobody's out there deadheading them, and they bloom just fine. And my sample plant here, whoops, sorry. I don't know if you Zoom people can see this or not, but there's a specific left it on here. There's a seed pod on here, unless it fell off, along with the bloom. So yeah, it's not bothering them at all having that seed on there, down there. So they, if it's bothering you, like if it's right by the front door and you go by it every day and you think, oh, that's really ratty, yeah, go ahead and pop those things off of there. But don't feel that you have to. This is it's going to develop into seeds. Now, the only time I would recommend that you deadhead is you have a new plant. You just put it in the ground. You don't want it wasting its energy putting out seeds. You want it to put out roots, and you want it to have new, foliage, and you want it to be setting blooms for next year. You don't want it wasting energy on seeds. So in that case, yes, it's probably worthwhile to deadhead it. What is eating my rhodie? Now, I'm going to spend a little bit about root weevils because in my yard, I have more problems with those blasted root weevils than I do any other pest or disease. So, and unfortunately, they're difficult to get rid of. So they're very characteristic, this notching on the leaves. And you can see on my little sample plant here, I got a little notching there too. That is from root weevils. And this is the culprit right here. It looks sort of like a little tiny beetle, except it's got a snout. That's what makes it a weevil. They got six legs. And they also have these grubs. They're down in the soil where you can't see them. The grubs are almost as destructive as the weevils are because they'll eat the fine root hairs of the rhododendrons. And if they're really hungry or really bad, they'll actually eat the bark. And so typically root weevil damage is cosmetic, but I have had circumstances where there's so many of them that they actually kill the plant. Yeah. Oh, where's my? That's the next one. This one kind of shows you again the size. These are smaller guys. This is a dime. They're small. They're nocturnal, so you're not going to see them out there during the day. The grubs are underground, so you don't see them at all, and they're hard to get rid of. So all of these different controls, I think I have tried every one of them. Some of them with greater success, and some not so much. But I'm going to spend a couple of minutes going through this. Plant disease resistant varieties, plant ones that the root weevils don't like to eat. And this is extension bulletin, whatever the 097E, which you can find online, I'm sure. That's probably your best defense. Find ones they don't like to eat. Then trim up low-lying branches on the ones that are on the ground. Basically, you don't want to give them a pathway to go from the ground up into the plant, into the leaves. Nematodes. Now, nematodes can be very effective, but the timing is critical. You only apply the nematodes when the soil is warm. I don't know about you, but right now in the winter is when I'm thinking about root weevils, because I go out and I look at my plants and there's not much else going on in the garden at this time of year, and I think, oh, I really should get after those root weevils. Well, it's not going to do anything. You have to have warm soil. It has to be at least 52 degrees. Now, on a day like today, it's hard for us to imagine that our soils ever get to be that hot, but in the summertime they do, and that's when you need to apply the nematodes. And you can buy them online. I just happen to be looking at Territorial Seed, and they have them, but they're not ready yet. You can keep them in the refrigerator for up to a month, and then you apply them in when the soil's warm, so more like summertime. And this is where personally I have a hard time, because in the summertime there's so much else going on in the garden. I've got vegetables and we've got fruit trees, and I'm not thinking about nematodes, but this is really what you need to, that's when you need to be applying them, when the soil temperatures are warm and the nematodes are available, obviously. It's kind of, you get this stuff and you mix it with water, it's a drench, you put it on the soil, and it can be very effective. They're nocturnal, we've mentioned that. The adults start coming out in May and June. And then, so this is another thing you can do in the summertime, is go out in a nice warm summer night, and you've got your flashlight, and you put around a white bed sheet or some cardboard or something, and you shake the plant. And theoretically, the nematodes, not the nematodes, but the root weevils are going to fall off, and then you'll collect them on your piece of cardboard or whatever, and then you dispose of them. Well, this sounds great in theory. Personally, I haven't had much luck doing this, and it could be just me. I don't know, but either I know they're there. I know they're notching my leaves, but just standing out there on a summer night and trying to shake the plant, I haven't had much luck with this. But maybe you will. You can paint the stems with some kind of a sticky substance like tanglefoot. Basically, as this isn't going to do anything for the grubs in the ground, but as the adults are emerging and they're trying to climb up the stems, you'll stop them. They won't be able to get to the leaves and they won't be able to notch your leaves. Now, kind of the bad news is there's no approved pesticides, according to WSU, for weevil control. And I just looked on their website just yesterday, just hoping, because I'm always hoping that there's going to come something else, at least not for the home gardener. There may be some that you have to have an applicator's license to apply. Most of us aren't going to get into that at all. So pretty much you're, kind of stuck with doing these other different methods to try to control the root weevils. Or you can just try to live with the damage and hope that it's just cosmetic and it's not bad enough that it's going to kill your plants. Okay, fertilizer. Slow release fertilizer for acid-loving plants. And whether you make your own or whether you buy it commercially, get a slow release one that's specifically for rhododendrons, camellias, azaleas, acid-loving plants. It's really worth it. And I was trying to find, well, so what's the difference? What makes it for an acid-loving plant or not? And the difference that I found is they have sulfur. Those fertilizers have sulfur. I was meant to go back and double check and find out what the sulfur does to, inhibit or help the uptake of nutrients for acid-loving soils. And I forgot to go back and do that, but that's kind of the main difference. So look on the bag and make sure it's a slow release one. Do not use a high nitrogen fertilizer such as Miracle-Gro or ones like that. Rhododendrons, since they are shallow rooted with a fibrous root, it's very easy to burn the roots. So really you're better to err on the side of not enough fertilizer than too much fertilizer, because it's so easy to burn the roots on there. Kind of the rule of thumb is 1 cup per 3-foot plant, and then scale it up or down depending on the kind of fertilizer you're using and the size of your plant. And I had somebody ask me, well, does that mean, I've got this 10-foot rhododendron, does that mean I'm out there with a wheelbarrow putting fertilizer on there? No. In fact, I would say if you've got a nice rhododendron, is blooming consistently, the leaves are green and healthy looking, you may not need to fertilize at all. It may be getting all the nutrients it needs just from the compost and the organic material that you've got around the base of it. So it's kind of up to you how much you want to do with the fertilizer again. It probably would help the bloom if at least every couple of years or so, you might want to give them a little bit of fertilizer. And then again, the kind of the rule of thumb was if you're going to do it twice, do it on Valentine's Day and then Father's Day. And if you're only going to do it once during the spring, which is kind of me, anytime between March and April should be fine. Don't do it after July 1st. Even June is really kind of late because you're more apt to burn the roots then. And you also don't want a lot of weak growth coming on that might be damaged in the winter. And I think that's about it. So in conclusion, we went over some of the complaints and what you need to grow rhododendrons of the wide variety. I hope that you'll all consider rhododendrons in your landscape and maybe expand beyond May and pink and enjoy them for the wonderful plants that they are. So thank you. We'll see if we have any questions. Yeah.
I had a question when you were talking about the bud blast and fungal diseases in general. Would you recommend spraying like a copper fungicide on rhododendrons, or is that a big deal?
Can
you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was about the bud blast, and you recommend spraying with a copper sulfate. I'd really have to go and check the website. I don't know if they talked about the WSU has got a great website called HortSense. You can actually go in there. It's HORT, like horticulture, SENSE, and you can go in there with different problems, and then they give you they start with the least toxic suggestion, and then they kind of move on down. And right offhand, I'd have to go back and look and see what they recommend for that. Is the frustrating thing about it is it's so variable. You know, like once it shows up, you know, with that fruiting bodies or whatever, it's too late for this year. You know, you're not gonna have any effect on them. And the next year, you might not even have any problems. You know, it might be different conditions, and it would just be kind of a waste of time and effort spraying them. I would say if you consistently year after year you're losing all your buds to bud blast, then yeah, you need to figure out something, what to do. I guess way in the back there.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hi.
I have a 60-year-old beautiful, gorgeous scented rhodie that cascaded down by standard. And somebody did what they were doing, they trimmed all the skirt off and turned it into a ball. And what can I do to promote shoots on the lower side rather than just the crown? Repeat the question.
Oh, she's got a big old rhodie that somebody pruned incorrectly, basically took, if I understand correctly, took a lot off the top of it, off the crown.
No, they took the skirt.
They took it off the bottom, okay. And so you want to have more of it down below? Okay, you could, again, back to anywhere you can find a node. You know, if you prune right above that node, it'll stimulate growth at that point. And it should be, you know, multiple stems rather than one stem. So that might be something that you can try. I don't know, Barbara, can you think of anything? Right offhand, maybe we can, you know, we can take a look at it and see if we can figure something out. And let's see, I think here in the front, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. You were talking about the dwarf rhodies and the grande rhodies, only I couldn't quite catch that name. You know.
Oh, the really big leafed ones? Or is that what you're? Oh,
Yeah, just the flower, the bloom itself, and you were talking about the large, you know, display, the large bloom of the rhodie. I thought you called it a grande something.
the bloom itself?
Yeah.
A truss? Where it's got a kind of long stalk with.
I think she's talking about the southern.
Or the like the big leaf rhododendrons, the ones that have the leaves that are a foot and a half.
I thought it was early on.
Oh, yes, grande or sino grande, both of those are species rhododendrons that have huge leaves.
Okay. But
yeah.
is there a name? But I thought you gave it.
Well, sino grande is SINO GRANDE.
INO.
SINO, sino grande. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're known for their huge leaves. And also ones that don't bloom particularly young. They have to be pretty mature to get some blooms off of them. Okay, way in the back.
Our property, we have a big gas line running down the property line, but it's about 4 feet down. It sounds like these might be good to plant not too far from that, because they said they're shallow.
Shallow rooted?
And no tap root. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the question was, there's a gas line running through her property and she wants to know if you can plant rhododendrons on top of it. Do you know how deep is the gas line?
4 feet.
4 feet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would think you would be fine if it's okay with the gas company, you know. You might want to touch base with them. But we had one of our members in our chapter who actually planted them over her septic system. I don't know if that's really advised, but it, you know, seemed to work okay because they are relatively shallow rooted. But okay, I guess in the black, you're back there. Yes.
So here's my house. Our rhodies look like spider plants. Like they're barely slowing down the stalks, and it's just like big blooms on the end.
Mm.
They're very mature, like very, very.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're also, we live in like the ground of the lake, so it's like all trees. Like it may not be enough sun, but also I don't want to over strengthen their, like, because I don't have everything going down. Like, what would you recommend? back?
Oh, so the question is that she has some mature rhododendrons and they've gotten kind of tall and leggy, is that right? And you're kind of interested in maybe how you can get them bushier and maybe get, and also a lot of trees around so that they're getting a lot of shade. If you might be able to kind of limb up some of the trees so they get a little bit more sun, that might help. I don't know if that's a possibility or not. Back again, you can take them back a third of a year, just, you know, back to a node or something, even if they're tall and leggy and they just have blooms or, you know, just leaves on the ends, you can go ahead and cut it back. It'll be a bare stem. It's going to look pretty weird there for a while because you're just going to have this bare stalk there. But if you cut it at the node, then it should stimulate more growth lower down. And let's see, I don't know who's next. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I want to tell you, I used the sticky stuff to get rid of the root weevil, and it worked really well.
It worked. Excellent. That was a comment.
Wear gloves. Wear gloves when you put it on.
That's for the Zoom people. That was a comment that he used the sticky stuff on the stems and it worked. So yes, that's great. I think there's somebody in the back there.
So my question was related to hers. I had the same situation 2 years ago with the property elected for a while. So I have these rhododendrons, some of them are 6, 7, 8 feet tall, but they're like all branches, just little leaves at each end. So when you say cut at a node, are there nodes below the leaves?
Yes. There can be, oh, the question was back to, she has another one that's kind of overgrown. They're tall and leggy, and there's leaves just on the ends of the branches. Yes, there are nodes all down the branch, and so you might kind of have to, you know, look for them. But it doesn't necessarily have to be right where the whorl of leaves are. You can cut it down below that. It's just, you know, gotta look for the node, and sometimes they're kind of hard to find depending on the variety.
They did still flower, but
Oh, there you go.
like one very few. One of them was like lavender. It's beautiful. I've never seen
Okay, great.
it.
Maybe just one more question.
Okay, I'm doing, was there anybody in the chat or whatever do we need to do?
What I'd like to do as far as questions on the chat is we just in the, because of time, I think we'll answer those via email. So we have everybody's email who registered, and we'll send out those responses to those questions via email.
Okay, was there one more question?
Yes, I have a question. You had mentioned not to give the rhododendrons like high nitrogen, like Miracle-Gro. And I have this beautiful little sad rhododendron that my neighbor, you know, put this Miracle-Gro. And so I said, if you don't want that plant, because it's going to die here, I'll take it. So I dug it up and I took it home, dug a hole, put it in the ground. It's starting to come back now. But is there anything I can do to encourage those? You said that the nitrogen kills the little root things, the little baby roots. Is there anything that I can do to encourage those baby roots to come back, or should I just leave it and maybe give it a little? What should I do?
I think probably if it was me, I would just put compost and mulch over it and just, you know, keep it watered and basically don't put any more fertilizer on it.
So the compost is not too much nutrients for it?
Usually not, no. I mean, I suppose you depends on your compost, but usually not, no. You know, you might, I suppose the more you water it, the more you would kind of flush out that extra fertilizer. Oh, sorry about the question. She had a question of her neighbor or whatever gave her a rhododendron and had been fertilized with Miracle-Gro, so really high nitrogen. It wasn't really looking very good. So she took it and wants to know basically what to do with it now. And so we were talking about basically you could kind of water it, try to flush out that excess nitrogen, put compost, put mulch on top of it just to keep it that organic matter on there, and then leave it. I wouldn't fertilize it again for another few years or whatever, just and see how it does. Hopefully it'll do well for you. Okay, thank you very much.